And I wanted to start with, I definitely want to dive into certain elements of the book because I think what you do in this book so well is you remove blocks for people. Like I think the way you were just describing you having blocks in intimacy and relationships, I think we know this and my community feels this and I felt this in my life. There were blocks in what I believed was true of my potential, or blocks that I thought were true of what I could achieve within success, or blocks around how I felt about judgment and failure. And so I want to dive into all of that.
Yeah, I remember the first year meeting you.
Yeah.
You were like, I don't think I can make, 6 figures a year. You're kind of like, I don't even know if that's possible or if I'm worthy of that or deserving of it, or if the work I'm doing, I'm supposed to be making that, that much money.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a block of yours for, I don't know, well, probably a long time before then, but for a couple of years until you really were able to work your way through that. What was the thing inside of you that allowed you to unblock the financial fear that you had?
It's exactly that, right? Like I had grown up in a family where the language around money and the psychology around money was we have just enough. And generally people who have money have done something bad to get money. So it's been like negative ways or like manipulative ways, or they must have done something shady in order to have wealth.
Yeah.
And so people who are good don't have access to that kind of wealth because they're not shady people. And so I think when I grew up with that, I remember many days having zero in my bank account, just living off of the last amount of money I had to pay off a bill or whatever it may have been. And I think what it really hit me as time went on was I was having all this impact. Like at one point, I still remember this, I had 150 million views and I was 4 months away from being broke.
It's crazy, man.
And I was just like, I can't make the stuff I care about anymore because I don't have money. Like videos cost money to make. Like this, I always say to people, like this podcast, this studio costs money to have. Like it costs money to have teams. And, right now we have producers behind the scenes and editors and podcast leads. And there's a whole team of people that make things possible. And when you're financially scarce, and I don't mean that in terms of how much money you have, but in your mind, when there's a scarcity around money or anything, scarcity around love, or scarcity around energy, or scarcity around health.
Yes.
It just limits you. And so for me, what you just went through, I had to rewire my relationship with money.
Yes.
And we have a relationship with people, we have a relationship with money, we have a relationship with our body, we have a relationship with our mind.
Exactly.
And so to me, it was that.
I'm curious then, what was I want to tell this.
Dude, this is not your interview, Lewis.
I know.
This is what you always do.
I want to tie
I know
it
you're
in,
an interviewer, but
I want to tie it into bringing it back to me.
Yeah,
I get
yeah.
it. But I want to tell the story of the exact moment when the block went away from me from having fear around being trapped in intimacy after a 5-month journey of like intensive therapy and what it did for me. I want to share that story in a moment, but I'm curious, what was the moment? Was there a moment where something like you're unlocked in your heart, your body, your mind, your spirit, where you're like, oh, I'm deserving of money. I'm deserving of making more or having abundance or whatever it might have been, and being free of that feeling? Was there a moment for you?
I mean, I think I'm still getting there as well. There's a part of it where you're always still rewiring, because when something's so deep rooted, it kind of like never like just leaves. But I'd say that I got more comfortable with it. That's a great question. When was that moment? If I
like, was there a breakthrough? Was it in a negotiation for a speaking gig where you're like, oh, I'm used to only making this much, but let me ask for more, or something kind of unlocking inside of you?
I actually think it was, and this, I haven't talked about this before, but I think it's, and I'm sharing it because I'm with you, and it is the answer to your question. I think it was the first year that I could give over 6 figures to a charity that I loved.
Wow.
Like, that's what it was. It was that feeling of, and I knew that charity would have died if it didn't have that much money.
Interesting.
And they were doing really meaningful work that I cared about. And I realized that I was like, oh, wait a minute. And that's not like, oh, look how great I am, I saved it. That's not the point. The point was, I could only do that, and I could only be a part of that because I'd rewired my mindset. So if I wanted to create meaning and impact in the work, and this is one way, there are plenty of other ways to give back through time and energy. But to me, I was like, oh, like I can trust myself that if I have more, I will give more. And I want to trust myself that, we always hear that quote. I don't know whether it's from Grant or from Jordan Belfort, but the idea of like money only makes you more of who you are.
Yes, it exposes who you are.
It exposes more of who you are. And that idea that you're only going to become more, it's going to put a spotlight. We were just talking about that yesterday, like the idea that you don't change. And I felt for me, that was me trusting myself. And I think when you rewire it, like you trust yourself, what you were saying earlier, like you get a trust of like, oh yeah, I will do good with this. Like, because that's who I am at the core.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
But it sounds like it was a reflection process. It was you trying stuff. It was you being like consistent and practicing.
And still today.
Yeah, exactly.
It never goes away. Yeah.